All right, so just a quick question from your side. When do you plan to take the GMAT? If in case you have not decided, then you can probably just go ahead and say not decided, but in case you have. All right. So I think it's a mix. I think some of you have planned to take it in September. Some of you have planned it in October. Still a few have in November. But most of you are taking it in the next couple of months. Those who have not decided, probably it's a good time for you to start deciding, because the moment you have a deadline, you probably end up having a slightly better sense of how to go about your prep. Otherwise, what happens? Sometimes it just becomes this very long, drawn-out battle with GMAT, right? So, what do we have? So, just a couple of things. First, in terms of the rule, in case you're not able to hear me, just make sure you go ahead and let me know in the chat window. So, if there is anything that you are not able to hear, but I would assume that you will wait for at least a few seconds, at least 10 seconds or so, before you let me know. Okay, and we will try to go all the way till about 5 o'clock. I'll make sure that we go through a bunch of questions, look at various ways in which we could have approached that question, and we will also be, looking at you, trying to understand what that question is really trying to test you on. Okay, so that's really my agenda. I have about 6 to 7 questions, but these questions may take a long time, because we'll be looking at the explanation. We'll be looking at how we could go about solving such a question. All right. Just a quick background in terms of me. So my name is Arun, and I actually am from Tamil Nadu, but I have never lived in Tamil Nadu, right? So when people look at me and they think I'm Tamil, yes, I am Tamil, but I grew up in Gujarat all my life. I grew up in a place called Baroda for about 22 years of my life. And in fact, that's where I did my entire college, my entire schooling. And I started my first job in Baroda as well. I worked for 2 years. And then, as with most people in the software engineering industry, I made this move to Bangalore, right? Bangalore was really the mecca for us when it came to software jobs. So I came to Bangalore sometime in 2003, and continued coding for some time, but very, very quickly I realized that my talent was not in coding. My talent was not in pure play software. Very honestly, I was a terrible programmer. So, opportunity came my way, and I got into project management. So project management was relatively easier for me, because it just required me to have good communication skills. It required me to meet clients. It required me to manage projects, manage a team, write emails. So that's really where I loved, doing this. I did that for about 4 or 5 years, and as I said, it's my past life. So 2011 is when I quit the technology industry, and I started Crackverbal full time. But just a note on this, I don't know if many of you know the story, but I actually was teaching right from 2001. So I taught for almost close to 6-7 years. Then one day I decided to say, I decided to hang up my boots and say no more teaching. And many of my students, many of them on a forum called Pagal Guy, in case you've heard of it. So Pagal Guy used to be pretty active, pretty popular back then. So I used to be on Pagal Guy. I used to be advising people on GMAT, and they said, since you are helping us, why don't you help us crack verbal? Right? So that's really how the name Crackverbal started. So I moonlighted for about 5 years, 2006 to 2011. So people who ask about startups and MVPs, my suggestion to them, try it out if you're doing it along with your full-time job. If it is something that you can continue, something that, is really your passion, then you will find a way to make it into a full-time job. So that's what happened. 2011, I decided to quit my job, started Crack Verbal. Been doing that ever since. It's about 6 years now, enjoying my life teaching. I spend most of my weekends teaching in the classroom in Bangalore. I also do admission services, applications, whatever way in which I can help students. So if you have heard Malcolm Gladwell's, famous 10,000 hour theory, which in which he says that if you do anything for 10,000 hours, you pretty much can become an expert in it. So teaching and mentoring is something that I've definitely done more than 10,000 hours. So I don't claim to be an expert or a genius. I just claim to be someone who's been there and done that, and is continuing to do it on a professional basis. So I'm just here to share my knowledge with you. Here is a random fact. When I was in college, I used to be a trivia quizzer. I used to love quizzing. I cannot say that anymore, but about 10 years, I participated in almost every quiz. And my biggest highlight was I appeared on national TV. There used to be this quiz program by Siddharth Basu, one of the famous quiz masters. And I appeared on TV, and for me, it was a big deal appearing on TV. I recorded it on my VCR. That's the stuff that we had way back then. And I still have a recording. I plan to put it on YouTube sometime. All right, so that's about me. Couple of free resources in case you have, not done so. So you can check this out. So one is the online course. So definitely recommend that you can go ahead and sign up for the online course in case you have not done so already. We also have free videos as part of the trial course, so you can see those. The second resource is the YouTube videos. So recently we have released approximately 20 plus videos where I'm explaining how to approach the essays for all the top schools. So right from Harvard to Tuck and Stanford and Darden and Duke and you name it, I have created a short 10-15 minute video which will help you write your application essays. All right. So apart from this, there is one more resource is you could go to GMAT on the go. So it's been in a beta phase for some time, but you can always go ahead and take it for a spin. There are these official GMAT questions that we have put up over there. So these official GMAT questions are questions that we have found on GMAT Prep software, but are not part of the official guide. So that means if you have done official guide, you have done verbal review, then maybe GMAT on the go could provide you with some useful fuel that you can use for your GMAT prep. All right. So pretty much, and then the last point is the Crack Verbal forums. I have personally been participating as well. So in case you have a question or a query, please go ahead and post it on the forum. This is right now available only for Crack Verbal students, but we also have explanations. You can just go ahead, search for it and see if any of the explanations that we have is useful. All right. So that pretty much does with what I wanted to say on that part. Now coming to, I'm just trying to see if there is a way by which I can, yeah, so there is a whiteboard over here. So let me start off with the whiteboard. All right. So when I talk about sentence correction, there are a couple of things that I usually tell, and I just wanted to make sure that before we get started on today's session, we kind of go through it once more. So essentially, I would say there are, essentially 3 things that you probably need to know about sentence correction. All right. I'll just keep it very simple. 3 things. Make it black. Red sounds a little scary. Yeah. So the first thing that I want to tell, and this is people say, okay, Arun, all this experience that you have teaching sentence correction, what is that one big mistake that students do? All right. And I want all of you to just take out like 15-20 seconds and introspect on it. But I think to a large extent, the mistake that most students make is that they don't realize that sentence correction tests you on logic and not only rules. See, if you get me a person who is scoring a 30 raw score, okay, a person who's scoring a 30 raw score, someone who's scoring a 28-30 raw score, I can show you a person who can score 40. In fact, I would say many of my students who actually score, initially in the 30s, lower 30s, or let's say 20s, the problem is never with theory. They seem to know enough and more theory. Okay. The problem invariably happens when you have, the application of that theory. That is what is stopping you from doing well on the GMAT, right? It is not about knowing the rules. It's about applying it. Think about it. If it had been about rules, then pretty much we would have been able to study for GMAT right from college first year. Or I don't know, in India, maybe there are companies which will start 8th standard, target GMAT 2030, correct? We can learn all the theory in the world. But do you think it really helps you on the GMAT? Right? So one thing you have to realize is that GMAT is using English just as a delivery mechanism. What it's really testing you on is whether you can function effectively in the corporate world. Okay. And I'll tell you, I've had so many students who have come to me after many years and said, Arun, when I was doing the GMAT, I had no idea. But now at work, I realize how much English is being used. In corporate communication, you cannot afford to miscommunicate. Okay, it may cost you millions of dollars. So what really GMAT is doing is GMAT is checking whether you are able to understand, you are able to articulate a particular thought clearly in the form of a sentence. You give me any sentence correction question, I can tell you pretty much the rules are very basic. In fact, all the rules I can explain in under an hour, but that is not going to help you on the GMAT. The moment you get above a 40 level, it is going to be about how you are able to use logic, and we will see today, right? So I want you to stop worrying about theory. I want you to stop worrying about grammar. I think way too many people I've seen worrying about grammar and theory. Yes, grammar is important, some amount of it, but it's not going to be the difference between a 30 and a 40 verbal raw score. All right. The second thing that I wanted to tell you is SE is about elimination of wrong answer options. Okay, it's about elimination and not selection. I don't need to know how the right answer choice looks like. Okay, in fact, here is a deal. The right answer choice is right in front of me. Correct? It is right in front of me. I don't need to worry. I just need to make sure that I'm not picking any of the 4 wrong answer options, right? So what happens when I approach the test? See, if I were to look at it, quant, I cannot say this. Quant, when I have a problem in arithmetic and the answer options are, let's say 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, it is not that I'm going to pick 15 and say, oh, it could have been 5, or it could have been 10, or it could have been 20. I know it is 15 because my mathematical equation, basically, I plug in the values and I got 15. But in sentence correction, it is not that a particular answer choice is the best answer choice. We are just trying to do what in technology world, we have this thing called bubble sort, correct? So it is like a bubble sort. We are trying to compare one answer choice with another. And which one is better? We basically keep that, we eliminate the other. Then again, what do? I compare that answer choice with the next answer choice. Which one is better? I keep that, eliminate the other. I keep doing that till I am left with the right answer choice. Now, do I need to love the answer choice? I don't. I just need to hate the other 4 wrong answer options enough for me to say, look, I have nothing particular with this, but just because the other 4 answer choices couldn't fit in, I have to be left with this. In fact, when you look at the differences among the answer choices, each of them is screaming out to you saying, look, there is something about me that is different than the other answer options. We have to use that. If you give me a sentence without the underlined part, without 4 other answer options, trust me, I would not do well. Just because I know grammar and logic doesn't mean that I will be able to solve it. Moment you give me an answer choice, I immediately recognize what are the differences. And those differences help me eliminate. Remember, it does not help me select, it helps me eliminate. Once I eliminate it, whatever is left, I have to fall in love with it. Okay, whether I love that answer choice or not, no, I still have to love it. And the third thing is SC is about discipline. See what happens, a lot of people know they don't understand what is the meaning of this word discipline. So let me just explain this discipline thing to you. Okay, this discipline is when I start using logic and grammar above emotions and feeling. What does it mean? It means I've seen way too many times, students, very smart students, they end up picking a right answer choice because it sounds right, okay, or because it sounds wrong. If you have discipline, you will realize that all GMAT questions, all SE answer options, it's all about logic and grammar. If I'm not able to figure out a logical or a grammatical reason to get to my answer, I am not there yet. In fact, sentence correction, I would probably put it as 4 levels. Okay, so you have level 1, 2, 3, 4. So I will tell you what the 4 levels are, and probably you can tell me what level you are at. Okay, level 1 is where a student is looking at a sentence correction question, doesn't have an idea of how to go about it, reads each answer option, tries to get a feel, and picks what he thinks is right. Okay, he's not using too much of logic, not, or some amount of logic is involved and some amount of grammar perhaps, but he's pretty much using his gut feel to pick the answer. Right? Level 2 is when the same student now starts using grammar and logic. He's able to eliminate 2 or 3 of the answer options, but between the last 2 answer options, he essentially ends up going ahead and making a educated guess, going with again his emotion, his feeling, that why is this right or why is this wrong, what he thinks he hears. Right? Level 3 is when a student is able to get down to the last 2 and even there use grammar and logic, but is very unsure of some of the reasonings he has used to eliminate some of the answer options. Like he knows, yeah, I eliminated it, but I'm not very sure, I'm not very convinced whether I could have used that rule. So he is using rules and logic completely 100%, but he's just not convinced on some cases why he's using that. Level 4 is when a person is not only using logic and grammar, but the other part, he is also very clear, okay, in terms of, this saying, I not only know why I used it, but I also have a very clear idea of why I eliminated the wrong answer options, correct? So that's really where, the 4 levels, according to me, are, okay? So I think, let me just ask you this question now. Let me add a poll question over here. So if I were to ask you, so let me, okay, I'm still a little getting used to the this once again. Huh. Excellent. So yeah, I just wanted to know what level do you think you are at? So some of you at level 1, couple of you at level 3. Okay. Okay, most of you are at level 3. That's very good. I see almost more than half of you have picked level 3. I know level 4 is very hard, but it's heartening to know that at least some of you are at. Okay, good. So yeah, I think most of you think you are at level 3. But yeah, this is something that I just wanted to share with you, just my thoughts before we get started with the questions. So before I get into it, I just wanted to know, you have a Q&A box. So in case you have any questions, you can post it onto the Q&A box. So I will try to take it up as and when we go. All right. Are you able to see the Q&A box? Okay, good. So in case you have any questions, you can just post it into that box. All right. Good. So let me just. Okay. So good. Now let me just go ahead and let me now get to the main part. So let me go back to sharing the screen. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a set of questions. So what we will do is as soon as as you see the question, I'm going to be giving you about 2 minutes. I'll tell you at the end of 90 seconds, and then we'll go for another 30 seconds with you filling in. So please, I'll be giving you the poll. So make sure that you type in your answer in the poll button. Okay. So first question. Okay. Let's see if whatever I said made sense. Let's try to apply it onto this question. Okay. So first question coming up. 90 seconds starts now. Okay, so let me just are you able to see it now? Okay, sorry. Are you able to see it now? Okay, sorry. Then I'll restart it now. Okay, so I'm just giving out the answers now. So the username was Redmi Note 4. Just post it onto the poll, please. Half of you have not answered. I'm going to end the poll very shortly. So why don't you just go ahead and see, even if you were to make an educated guess, what would have been the right answer? Pick whatever you like. Or if you're between the last two, just go ahead and make a educated guess.
It's 4 o'clock.
All right. So a few of you have not polled in. So those who are, in this webinar, I would request you to go ahead and participate in the polls, because even if you don't know what the answer is, sometimes what may happen is, it's important to get involved so that you are able to understand it. Okay. So I'm going to close the poll now. So we had a majority over here. So D for Delta is what most of you seem to have chosen. We have a few people, 4 of you with B, you have a couple with E, and you have one person with C. Okay, so let me kind of go about, looking at this question, seeing what is it that we could have done. All right. Now, let's look at the first thing. All right. Um, Whenever you see such a question, make sure you take a step back and you are able to understand that this question is not so much about grammar. It's just you have to understand a little bit. People immediately start jumping in. They start looking at the difference between have to know and would have to know. And what happens, they spend way too much time trying to figure out the difference, when in reality it's GMAT knows that a student, when he's looking at this question, will end up trying to decide between have to and would have to, right? Very honestly, this extra word would, if I have it or I don't have it, wouldn't make too much of a difference. Think about it. I have to know something, like I have to know it now. I would have to know something, I would have to know something in the future, correct? Now, they are saying to develop more accurate and population forecasts, if you want to do it now, then you will say have to know. If you want to say in the future, then you will say would have to know. Correct? So now, let me see if there is anything else in the answer choice. So the first thing that attracts me is the fact that there is a comparison trigger then. Okay? So you're saying they have to know a great deal more than now. Okay. Now let's look at what is the answer option that we are comparing it with. There is another answer option which says then they do now. You see this? Then they do now, then they do now, and then you have then now, right? See, whenever you have two things that are being compared, okay, so if I were to say X, then Y, you need to have a proper comparison between X and Y, correct? X over here would be would have to know. So I will just say would have to know. Then they know now, correct? Now, grammatically, do can replace no, right? So if someone were to say, you know, do you know this? Yes, I do. So when you say I do, you kind of assume that do is actually replacing no over here. Okay. So they would have to know, then they know now. So you know that there is a comparison trap. So what I did, I ignored something that looked to be very obvious and I started looking at something else. So here is a tip for you on the GMAT. Whenever you are stuck on sentence correction, any question, make sure that you are able to take your eyes off what you're doing right now and start looking at something else in the question that could help you, right? So now I used comparison. I'm able to eliminate A for alpha. I'm able to eliminate E for echo. Okay. Now let's look at what is left. They would have to know a great deal more than they do now about the social and economical determinants of fertility, right? So you see this social and economical determinants, and then you have social and economic determinants. Now, if you think about it, both economic and economical are adjectives. When do we use economical? When do you use economic? See, economical is matters that pertain to, the cost, right? For example, I could say that I bought a car and, given the distances that I travel, it has turned out to be very economical to have one. It has turned very economical means it is giving me a good return on my investment. Whereas when I use the word economic, what I mean is pertaining to the economy, right? So now what I have is an economic advisor, right? So an economic advisor is an advisor who advises me on economy, right? So I could have said my economic advisor is actually very economical, which means that the information that is providing me about the economy is helping me, and I'm able to maybe make money out of it. Correct. So for that reason, between economic and economical, we need economic, because what he's looking at is the determinants of fertility. So you're looking at an adjective which will say it's a social determinant and it's a economic determinant, not an economical determinant. For that reason, answer option D for delta goes off. Sorry, um, yeah, B for Bravo goes off, C for Charlie goes off, leaves you with the right answer choice, D for Delta. Correct? So what you really learned from this question, or what is the takeaway I wanted you to have from this question is, if you're stuck somewhere, always look for somewhere else. You will find multiple ways to get to the right answer. It is not necessary that you go doing just one thing. All right? Okay, so if you are ready, let's get on to the next question. All right, so let's see, how do I go to the, okay, so I'm just trying to see what is the best way to disable the comments. Okay, wait a second, I'll just, I know you probably are not seeing my screen now, but I wanted to just, all right. All right, so let's take the next one. Okay, so you're able to, see this, so you can get started. right, so I'm going to now try creating the poll. So I'm sorry if it ends up like if the screen is not seen, but let me just start. I'll just use the same one for everything, I guess. Like as I said, those who have not polled, please go ahead and poll it. If you want to really utilize the webinar, you have to also start seeing if you can do it in about 90 seconds, right? So those who are sitting on the fence, not sure, go ahead and commit to an answer. I'll be ending the poll in the next 10 seconds. So in case you have, even if you want to make an educated guess, go ahead and do so. 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm ending it. So again, we have many of you picking B for Bravo. All right, so sorry about it. I ended up having a problem with my laptop, so the power just went off. Are you able to hear me now? You can post it on the chat window. Okay, great. You are able to hear me, right? Okay, good. So no, I just lost power. This is India, right, for you. Just one request, Aparna and everyone, Aman, and ask me a question on the Q&A window, but please use the chat window otherwise, okay? I want the Q&A window if there is any questions that you have regarding what we have done, okay? For everything else, you can use the chat window. I have that open. Now, what happens with this question is, I've seen many times when students see a question that seems very long and tedious, they just go blindly, all guns blazing, trying to solve the question, right? First thing, whenever I see a question like this, I would always stop and I would do two things, okay? The first thing that I would do is I would try to understand the underlying meaning of what the sentence is trying to say. Okay. So now what is it saying? It's saying because there are provisions of the new maritime code that provide that even tiny islets can be the basis for claims to the fisheries and oil fields of large sea areas. They have already stimulated international disputes over uninhabited islands. Now, very honestly, when I read it, it's kind of hard for me to understand, correct? It is not something that is very easy to understand. But now what I do is I try to break it up. Okay. Now, if you see, I have the word because over here. Because, and then I have one clause, and then I have another clause. So let me see this. There is some international dispute, okay, because of a new maritime code. What is this new maritime code? This new maritime code is telling me something that tiny islets can be the basis of claims. Now, even if I understand to this level, right, I don't need to do a PhD on what this sentence means, okay? But I just need to get a sense of what is it trying to say. Once I'm able to kind of put it in my mind, what I do is I start looking at the answer options and I start thinking, well, what could go wrong? Now, let me read this. Because there are provisions for the new maritime code that provide that even tiny islets can be blah, blah, blah. This is my reasoning, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to focus just on the second clause or the second part of the sentence. They have already stimulated international disputes over uninhabited islands. So let me look at answer option B. So at this point, I'm not very clear. A is very confusing. I've already spent about 35-40 seconds reading the sentence. Let me go to B. Now, what I'm doing is I'm just looking at the part which is over here, correct? Now, the moment I look at this part, I say, hey, you know what? There is it over here and there is they over here. Remember what I said. I do not need to be a genius to figure out that A has, they. If you are able to figure it out, first off, great, congratulations. But if you are anyone like me, I wouldn't figure out that they unless and until I see a 8. Now, immediately what happens, there is like a bulb that goes in my head and I'm like, okay, so what is happening over here? Or, what could be the difference? So then I realize that it is the maritime code that they are talking about. If you read it, you'll realize it's a code which is basically stimulating this dispute because there is nothing else over here. Cannot be the islets, cannot be the fields, cannot be fisheries. It has to be the code. So for that reason, I eliminate A. Again, what is the tip? What is the learning? The learning is do not assume that when you read a question, you get all of it right away. Okay, you may just require some time for your brain to absorb all that information for it to settle down. Now what I do, I didn't see anything wrong with B. Very honestly, my brain, I don't know, I'm just looking at it. I just think, okay, are fine. Now let me compare it with C. C says, even tiny islets can be the basis for claims to the fisheries and oil fields of large sea areas under provisions of the new maritime code, already stimulating international disputes over uninhabited islands. So let me understand this. First of all, I have a very big problem understanding what this sentence is trying to say, right? Because if you read B, it is very clear. C is unclear, but I'm not going to use that as a reason. I'm going to read it again. Even tiny islets can be the basis for claims to the fisheries and oil fields of large sea areas under provisions of the new maritime code. Do you see this part? Already stimulating international blah, 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 blah. Now, what is already doing this? Is it the maritime code? If it is the maritime code, is this, kind of connected? If it is connected, wouldn't I need something else to kind of connect them? So I have a problem when I read this, right? So I say, you know what? At this point, C for Charlie goes off, right? Now let me read D. Because even tiny islets can be the basis for claims to the fisheries and oil fields of large sea areas under provisions of the new maritime code, comma, this has already stimulated. What is this over here? Correct? See, again, all I'm doing is I'm just looking at this and saying, what is this doing here? I'm looking at the second part of the clause, right? Now, on the GMAT, one thing you can take is this will typically be used as an adjective. Okay, so you could say, this pen belongs to me, correct? Or this chair is where he sits. But I cannot say this. What is this? This has to refer to something. This cannot be referring to the entire preceding clause, right? So this cannot be referring to the whole clause. For that reason, D for delta goes off. Okay. Now let me look at E. Because even tiny islets can be the basis for claims to the fisheries and oil fields of large sea areas under provisions of the new maritime code, which is already stimulating international disputes, blah, 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 blah. Okay. So now what is which over here? So which over here modifies the code. Okay. So in that sense, I don't have a problem with which. But let us just understand the structure of E. Do you realize that E is missing an independent clause? It is like saying, because I like jalebi, comma, which is very sweet. Now, when you have something like this, right, which is very sweet is modifying jalebi. But this itself cannot be a sentence. For my sentence, I need an independent clause, correct? For that reason, E for echo goes off. Now what I do, I go back to B, I read B again. Because the new maritime code provides that even tiny islets can be the basis of claims, it has already stimulated international dispute. For that reason, I will pick B for Bravo. All right? Correct. It's an incomplete sentence. So now what is the learning that I have? See, again, my intention is that whatever questions we are solving, I'm just trying to see if there is something that I can, give as a result. What is the takeaway that we have from that? Okay. So the first thing I have as a takeaway is that whenever I have a question where there is an entire thing and that's completely underlined and it's complex to read, okay, don't try to go about trying to solve it, trying to answer it by just once again. Let's just try to I just turn off the annotation. Yeah, so don't try to go about using brute force approach. Correct? Brute force approach will not work very well. You have to go line by line, right? It is very easy when I want to do a vertical scan and there are answer options that are clearly different. Correct? So I just go pick, say, oh, A is wrong, B is wrong. But when you have complete sentences underlined, you may want to start with the second clause. Correct? That's number one. Number two, it's also important that sometimes you have a very logical reason to eliminate, not based on the fact that it is confusing. So each of the answer options, we picked a logical reason. Now I got a question from Aparna, it is not cause and effect in C. Even tiny islets can be the basis under this already stimulating. Yeah, so it is not really giving you a cause and effect. That's right. That's number one. And if you compare it with B, so even if I had eliminated D and D and I get down to B and C, correct? C essentially gives me one clause. It says tiny islets can be the basis for claims according to a new maritime law. And then it is saying already stimulating international disputes, correct? But the connection between the both is not clear as we have an answer option B, all right? Kalyan, the question which is as per answer option D, this must refer to adjective, but why is this referring to total sentence before. As per option D, this must refer to adjective. Why is this referring to? I didn't get the question, Kalyan. If you can rephrase it. See, a lot of times what happens, no, is that when you write it, if you can just give it, like if you just kind of give more context, it will help. So this cannot refer to the entire preceding clause. If that is what you're, asking, it cannot refer to the preceding clause. Okay. All right, so now let's look at one more question since we are getting into the hang of it. Yeah, I'm just trying to, yeah. So let me get to the next one. Are all of you able to see this? So 90 seconds, I'm going to start now. Okay, so relatively easy question. So let me it's a fairly short question, so I think most of you should have been done by now. So just go ahead and please mark the answer. Okay, I'm going to end the poll in the next 10 seconds. Three, two, one. All right. So yeah, I think majority of you have got B. Very good. We got 5 of you picking E for echo, and we have a couple of you picking A for alpha. Great. So let's do this. Let me look at it and try to see how would I have gone about solving this. Now, if you realize this is one of those questions where, it's not so much about grammar, correct? It's more about how you are able to understand what is being asked, right? So let's see the question. So it says, Tom Bradley was mayor of Los Angeles from 1973 to 1993, an era when the city had transformed from a collection of suburban neighborhoods to the second largest city in the United States. Okay, the first largest is, or rather the largest is New York, right? So let's see. If I were to look at it, I go through the answer options and I see there are 3 answer options with an era, and there are 2 answer options which says during which. Now look at the part just before that. 1973 to 1993. Now, what happens is when I do not have during, okay, I do not know whether the during is talking about 1993 or whether it's talking about this whole period between 1973 and 1993. Okay. So, for example, if I were to say a particular year, correct? So, let's say in 1983, during which India won the World Cup. Okay. By itself, this sentence makes sense, correct? Now, let me put another sentence over here or another part over here. The world changed from 53 to 1983. Now you say 1983 is during which India won the World Cup. So what happens when you say during which, we don't know exactly whether it's 93 or the period interim that we are looking at. So potentially it causes ambiguity, and GMAT hates ambiguity. For that reason, D goes off, E goes off, right? Now let me look at the others. All three of them have the word era, which is a very good noun modifier, right? So this is something like, this is called an appositive. So what is an appositive? An appositive is nothing but something that acts as a noun descriptor. So I could say Mahatma Gandhi, the father of the nation, was born in Porbandar. Now what happens? The father of the nation becomes my appositive, correct? I'm just giving a very simple example of that, but the father of the nation is Mahatma Gandhi over here, okay? So what happens over here is an era now has to refer to a time period. The meaning of era is there is a time period, okay? So for that reason, era has to refer to 73 to 93. Cannot be any confusion. Now let us look at the answer options C. An era that transformed it. The first question that I would have is, what do you mean by an era? Is it the era that transformed it? Or is that an era when it happened? See, what you really need is something which says when it happened. So it is not the era that transformed it, but it is the era during which it was transformed. So answer option C for Charlie goes off. Now I'm left with answer option A and B. A says an era when the city had transformed. Now there are two problems here. First problem, had transformed. When we say had transformed, it means that it had transformed when something else also happened. So are you saying that the city had transformed, then Tom Bradley was the mayor, right? So that is not what we want to say. So had over here is the incorrect tense. For that reason, A goes off. The second reason is when I use the word when. The difference between when and during. During talks about a period of time, okay? Whereas when talks about a specific instant of time, right? So I could say that, this is when, India did something, but I'm talking about a period, I would use the word during, right? So hence B for Bravo is the right answer, an era during which the city was transformed from X to Y. Right? So I'll take questions in case you have. Let me just clear this up. Correct. 1953 to 83 is referred to as the era. Repeat answer options D and D, I didn't get it. So why D and D are wrong? So one reason why D and D are wrong is because in answer option D and D, you have this problem that it says during which era. So D has another problem, during which. You will not say era during which. It won't be during which era. That is one reason, right, which I didn't mention earlier. But more importantly, during can either refer to 1983 or it can refer to the whole period. That is unclear, which is why we do not know whether it's 1983 or that period. That's where I gave the example. Okay. So I've already answered this question for Sudhanshu. Why had is option? Okay. So Ajay, you know why had is used, right? So when do we use had? We used had when we want to talk about something that is in past perfect, right? So I would say I had dinner, or let's say he had, given me the answer. Okay. So first he gave me the answer. Second, when I was not ready. So what did he do first? He had given me the answer. Second thing, when I was not ready. So when there are two events that happened in the past, the one that happens first, we will use had. For the one that happens next, we will use the simple past tense. So, Aman, that is actually not considered redundant. So I will just give you an example so that it makes it a little clearer. Perhaps 1 plus 5. Okay. So maybe if it had been just 1 year and there is no confusion, then perhaps we could have gone with it. But since we have multiple years, there is a clear problem. Okay. So let me do this. Let me give another example of showing why this is not redundant. Superman uh, Superman, the man of steel, is afraid of kryptonite. Now, what happens is my basic sentence is this: Superman is afraid of kryptonite. Now, what I'm doing is I'm giving an additional information about the man of steel. Sorry, I'm giving an additional information about the man of steel. So let me just use this annotation. Maybe it's a little clearer. Yeah. So just to write it again, Superman, the man of steel, is afraid of kryptonite. Now, you realize that I'm using this. I'm saying this is my main sentence. Superman is afraid of kryptonite. Now I'm describing Superman. Who is Superman? Who is he? He is the man of steel. Now this man of steel is not redundant. You cannot say man, dekho wapas aa gaya, right? Man of steel is nothing but another name for Superman. So it's okay when we want to describe it, right? We will end up repeating it. For example, let me give you another. Let me give another example. Uh, to Bangalore, the city of gardens, is a traffic nightmare. Okay. Now, if I were to put it this way, I come from Bangalore, so anyone else from Bangalore will probably understand what I'm saying. Now, if you see the city of gardens, what is it? It is describing Bangalore. So the city is not redundant. I need to use the word city. So just do one thing, just search for this word called appositive and try to see if you're able to get more examples. All right. So with that, let's see if we can apply it onto other questions. Just let me just clear it out and All right. So next question coming up, question number 4. Again, same thing. I'm going to be giving you about 90 seconds and then give you the poll. All right. So the poll comes up. Okay, so that's pretty much we have about most of you between answer option A and answer option C. So I see answer option C wins over B by just like one vote. And then you have a few people choosing D for Delta and B for Bravo as well. All right, so good. Now that these are the poll results, let's see how you would go about solving this question. So one key thing over this on such a question is sometimes what happens, people let their own emotions run over their ability to logically solve it, right? So first let's look at it. Are you able to identify what are the key elements in this sentence over here? Correct. So for example, what is it that floating in the waters of the equatorial Pacific, an array of buoys collects and transmits data on long-term interactions between the ocean and the atmosphere, comma, interactions that affect global climate. Excellent. So let's see. So there are these, what is this? This is a modifier, correct? Floating in the array, blah, 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 blah. This is my subject, all right? It's an array of buoys. And what does it do? What is the verb? It collects and transmits some kind of data, all right, between the ocean and the atmosphere. Now you have this very interesting thing which says interactions that affect global climate. So now let me just go back and look at the other answer options. Let me start with answer option B. B says with interactions affecting global climate. So let me understand this. With interactions. Now you have one which is long-term interactions. These long-term interactions, are they with some other interactions? When do we use the word with? How do we use this word with? See, with is typically used when you want to say in addition to, or if something possesses it. For example, I could say with less than a month to go, the student started to panic about his GMAT. Now, what did the student have? He had less than a month to go. Or I could say with a team of 10, the manager was able to deliver the project on time. What did the manager have? He had a team of 10. With a budget of $1 million, the government is able to execute the social welfare program. Now, what does the government have? A budget of $1 million. Now, the whole idea is in each of these examples, what I'm just saying is with has to have something in addition, possession of, correct? But long-term interactions are not having these interactions that affect global climate. For that reason, B for Bravo goes off. Okay. Now let me look at answer option C. It says, collects and transmits data on long-term interactions between the ocean and the atmosphere that affects global climate. So let me understand this. What is that referring to? Is it the atmosphere over here that affects, or is it the ocean, or is it the long-term interactions that affect global climate? So if you actually read it, ocean and atmosphere cannot be affecting global climate. The atmosphere is not affecting it. It is the interactions, the long-term interactions. That is what the buoys are collecting and transmitting. These long-term interactions which affect global climate. So answer option C, answer option D, same problem. What is atmosphere? Atmosphere is not affecting it. C goes off, D goes off, same reason E. It says between ocean and atmosphere as affects global climates. What is affecting global climate, right? So B, C, D, E goes off, leaves me with A. This is one thing that I want to tell, that though I say, grammar is not important, sometimes it is important for you to know grammar as well. And this is a classic case where grammar can potentially save you. Now, this is a concept. In answer option A, what you saw is a concept called absolute phrases. Now, what happens with absolute phrases is you get a thing which is similar to appositives that we saw earlier. So basically, it is the same thing. It is a noun plus noun modifier kind of structure. But what it does is it ends up modifying the entire clause, right? So in some sense, it kind of explains the previous clause. Now let us try to understand how this is structured. If you see the absolute phrase over here, it says interactions that affect global climate. Now, what is the noun? Interactions. What is the noun modifier? That affect global climate. But if you realize, it is just a noun I have over here. So what you have after the comma is merely a noun. Now, what does this noun do? This noun gives meaning to the previous clause. It adds meaning to the previous clause. Let's look at the previous clause. An array of buoys collects and transmit data on long-term interactions between ocean and atmosphere. What kind of interactions are we talking about? The interactions that affect global climate. For that reason, A for alpha. So in the previous question, if you see, we had to look at appositives, okay? But in this question, so this one, era was modifying the immediately preceding noun, but here interactions that affect it's modifying the preceding clause, right? So that's the difference between the two questions. So Karthikeyan had a question which is floating and affecting is parallel and matches in tense in option B. So let's see this. Are we trying to, just pick any thing in a sentence, and are we trying to create a parallel structure there? So this is for the question, why is floating and this part, right? So do I need to look at parallelism between floating and affecting? That's the question, right? So I don't need to look at the parallel thing between this. In fact, you know what, Karthikeyan, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to be this. I think you need to go a little, because your questions are, it just tells me that your basics are a little weak, because floating, okay, in that sense is not a verb. All right. Floating in this question is not even a verb. Floating over here is called a participle. It works as a adjective. So here it is telling me that the array of boys are what are floating. So it is not even a verb. Okay. So I think you just need to go and have a look at what is a participle. So that's probably will help you explain. And the other thing about parallelism is don't retrofit parallelism. See, over here, collects and transmits need to be parallel, correct? I understand that part. But you can't just pick anything and try to retrofit parallelism into it. Okay. All right. So let's do one more question. Okay. By the way, I just wanted to understand. You can probably let me know in the chat window. Is the pace of explanation fine, or do you need anything? You need me to go faster, slower? Do you want me to explain anything else? It's fine. It's good. Okay. All right. Cool. So let's take the next question then. All right. So I'm just going to go to the next one. I see a Q&A before that. Let me see if. Could you explain why the with interactions is not referring to long-term interactions again? Okay, so this is for the question for the answer option. With interactions, right? And answer option B, correct? So with means it has to take along with that. So long-term interactions with some other interactions. What do you mean by with? The problem with answer option B is the word with, correct? But when I say A, interactions, someone asked this, right? That is it redundant? No, it is not redundant. Why? Because that is how it is structured. I need interactions to explain something in the preceding clause. Okay, so let me give you another example. Okay, now I'm just giving another example. He was searching for a teacher A teacher who could explain the mysteries, right? So now what happens is this becomes a appositive. Why? Because you have a teacher. Who is a teacher? A teacher who could explain the mysteries. I am actually defining who the teacher is, right? Now I will give you another example. Okay. I'm just making it up on the spot, okay? So excuse me if it looks a little weird, but now let's look at it. So this one is called an appositive, right? So in this case, what happens, by the way, there is plenty of stuff that you can actually look for when you look at these terms. So appositives, what happens? You have a simple noun and that noun modifies the preceding noun. What I'm now showing you is absolute phrase. So what is an absolute phrase? An absolute phrase is, again, it's a noun, right? It's a noun. It will typically be noun plus non-modifier. So here it says a man. What kind of man? A man who can unravel everything. Now, what it does, if you realize, it is not modifying the preceding noun. It is not modifying mysteries. It is modifying the entire clause. The clause which says a teacher is important to explain mysteries, right? So again, as I said, just search for absolute phrases. You'll get plenty of examples. So on the GMAT, this could also be something that could be useful. All right. So good. Let me now go ahead and give the next question. Interactions is the same interactions, Snigdha, that we have in the first part, right? So in answer option A, it is the same interactions. Like I gave you this example of a man, no? So who man? The teacher mentioned in the first clause. So here the interactions in the underlined part is referring to the interactions in the non-underlined part, which in answer option B couldn't have been possible. All right? Okay, so let's look at the next one. So question number 5. Again, I'm going to give you 90 seconds.
It's 5 o'clock.
All right, just post it in the window over here. Okay, so pretty much I think most of you seem to have got E for echo, so that's good. We have a few of you picking B, C, and D as well. All right. So how do I go about this question? So first, remember it's important that when you have a question or a sentence in SC where only a small part is underlined and the sentence itself is long, what I've noticed is people just read the first part and they just completely ignore the other part, correct? So let's try to understand what does the whole sentence mean, correct? So I'm going to start off by this. The discovery of glass being expandable, and able to be shaped by human breath revolutionized glass working to such an extent that today glass blowing has become the generic term for all glass working, whether the glass is blown or formed by other techniques. So what he's saying, see, after this part, I don't need to worry, but I just read it, right? So the fact that glass can be blown, okay, can be expanded, okay, is something that has led to this second part, okay. So let's look at the first part. Very clearly, I see three of the answer options with discovery of glass and discovery that something, okay. So if I were to look at it, right, and if I were to just pick a sentence, right, I observed the moon, okay. He found the evidence of the murder, okay. Now if you notice in both of these sentences, I have the word observed, I have the word evidence. After that, what I have is I just have a noun, right? See, it says the murder, it says the moon. But now notice the moment I add that, okay, the moment I add that, let's see what happens to the sentence. I observed. Now, when I say that, I will not say I observed that the moon, full stop. After the word observed, I just need to have a noun. But the moment I put the word that, I need to have a clause, right? Or a sentence. So I will say, I observed that the moon was shining brightly, right? Something I observed. Or he found that the evidence that the murder was committed by the butler, correct? Now, these two examples, what you'll realize is that in both these cases, the moment I use the word that, after that, I need to have a clause, right? So the reason is that GMAT as a rule says after observed, after noted, after all of these words, I need to have a noun, correct? Now it can be a simple noun like, the moon, or it can be a noun phrase. What is a noun phrase? Noun phrase is nothing but a phrase, collection of multiple words. The brightly shining moon, correct? So it could be either a noun or a noun phrase. Or here is a third element of the family, okay? Something that you might have probably seen, but you did not know what to call it. It is a clause. It's called a noun clause. What happens in a noun clause is I say that the moon was shining brightly. Now, do you realize this entire thing becomes a noun? That the moon was shining brightly is known to me. What is known to me? That the moon was shining brightly. So what you have is, after the dot, you have a clause which is what makes it a noun clause. So just the meaning of this sentence, you know, it was not the discovery of glass. That is where the second part of the sentence becomes important. Maybe they had another question where they said discovery of glass was very important. Grammatically, that's perfectly okay. But here we are saying that the discovery that glass could do something is what is remarkable. It's not the discovery of glass. It is a discovery that glass could do something. For that reason, answer option A, B, C go off. Now let's look at answer option D and D. Between D and D, that glass can be expanded and it is able to shaped, or it is able to be shaped by human breath. So first thing, the discovery of glass. So I have this problem. What is it is able to? If I were to look at parallelism, someone was talking about parallelism, right? So this is a classic case of parallelism. When I have a word which says glass can be, now what are the two things that glass can be? Glass can be expanded. That is one thing it can be done. Glass can be expanded. And what is the second thing? It can be shaped. So these two, I require them to be in parallel. For that reason, answer option D for delta goes off, leaves you with E for echo. All right? So what you saw was we did just 5 questions, but in these 5 questions, there was so much that we learned. We learned about appositives, we learned about absolute phrases, we learned about noun clauses, correct? We looked at some tough questions. We looked at the fact that this cannot refer to a clause. This has to be used as an adjective, correct? So we learned a lot. And that is the beauty of sentence correction. If you solve a quant question in, let's say, 3 minutes or 2 minutes, and you take 3 minutes to understand it, sentence correction question, you will solve it in 90 seconds. But it may take you 10-15 minutes to completely understand what it is. Now, I know Aditya could probably say, hey, Arun, even in quant, we need to analyze. I agree. But see, my problem is in quant, there is not so much you can learn from the other answer options. Right? Whereas in the case of verbal, it's a virtual treasure trove. There is so much that you will learn. And trust me, just the simple things that we did today, you will see GMAT works in a very, it's a very set pattern. GMAT is very unimaginative. GMAT is a standardized test. It cannot wake up one day and decide to test you on something else. You just go back and look at all the questions. Same reasons will be used over and over in multiple questions. So the whole idea is the more questions I solve, the more I'm able to analyze, more I'm able to use logic, more I'm able to use the rules of grammar effectively, the more I get better at it. This is not a test of English. I've seen students who are not very fluent in speaking English, but who have scored 40 and above in verbal. And you know how it happens? It happens just because they just are able to apply it like a math formula, right? Sentence correction is, as close as it gets to mathematics. Once you know the rule, a large part of your success will depend on how effectively you are able to apply the rules. All right, so that's all that I had. Any questions that you have, not just on question number 5, but anything else, please let me know. So Rishi, I do have plans to take another session. So run on clauses, tenses. So maybe, what I'll do is next time I can probably, perhaps pick another set of questions. And I think that's the beauty of sentence correction. You pick any set of 15 questions, you will always learn something new. Each question you are kind of constantly, learning things. So yeah. But because it's not redundant. So Aparna asked a question which is but because redundant, but because it's not redundant, but is a transition word. Correct? But is a transition word because is meaning. Right? I'll give you an example. So here is a classic case where but because can be used. No problem. But is different because is different. Okay. Though both are conjunctions in that sense. Thank you, Kalyan. Always glad to help. I'll be having the next session on the 23rd. So 23rd or 24th. But as always, you'll be getting an email with the new session timings. So we will make sure that you get an email with that. All right. Last question. Between can be used for more than no. More than two, you will use among. Between is used for two. All right. Okay, so thanks a lot. It was great having you. Have a rest. Have a great rest of the weekend. Whatever is left, I know most of you are probably already suffering from Monday morning blues and thinking, man, I want to get back to work. But that's life. And just keep going. Just another couple of months. And hopefully you take the GMAT and you never have to solve sentence correction questions for the rest of your life like I do, right? For me, it's my job, so I love doing this day in and day out. All right, so thanks a lot, and I hope to meet you soon in the next webinar.